Hello and welcome to VNA News Daily Bulletin. Coming up next, we have your top stories. 13th National Assembly convenes last meeting in Hanoi. Vietnam aims to fine-tune national power development. Young girls join efforts to promote the image of Vietnamese traditional costume. The 13th National Assembly convened its last meeting in Hanoi on March 21st. Our reporters will bring more details.
As scheduled, the legislature will consider and make decisions on important issues and review the performance of state, national assembly, and government agencies of the past 5 years, along with the lawmaking issues. Leading state oppositions, including the President, Prime Minister, and National Assembly Chairman, are scheduled to be elected during the session as well. Speaking at the opening ceremony, National Assembly Chairman Wee Sinh-hung said that in the context of complicated regional and international situations, the 11th meeting offers a chance to look back on the past 5 years, assess the country's socio-economic, defense, security, diplomatic, and judicial affairs, and put forward works that need to be done in 2016 and in the following years. He asked the government, the National Assembly Council for Ethnic Affairs, National Assembly committees and agencies to submit thorough reports to the legislature, intensify coordination to ensure the meeting agenda takes place as scheduled. He also requested that National Assembly deputies contribute quality ideas to make the meeting a success. On behalf of the government, Deputy Prime Minister Wee Sun-phúc delivered a speech on a report on supplementary assessments of the implementation of the 2015 Socio-Economic Development Plan, a Socio-Economic Development Plan for 2016, and a report on Socio-Economic Development Plans for 2016 to 2020. Earlier, party and state leaders and deputies paid tribute to late President Ho Chi Minh at his mausoleum.
A labor inspection campaign targeting the construction sector was launched in the northern province of Hưng Yên on March 21st. More in the following report.
The campaign is co-hosted by the Vietnam General Confederation of Labor and the Ministry of Labor, Invalids and Social Affairs under the auspices of the International Labour Organization and the Dutch government. It aims to promote compliance with labor regulations and criteria on working conditions and health and safety in order to reduce accidents. It also looks to raise the awareness of employers, workers, and the whole society of labor law, as well as safety standards and labor hygiene in the sector, and increase the number of firms and buildings subject to inspection to at least 630 during March to November. The inspections will focus on working time, overtime work, salary, training on labor hygiene and safety, and personal protection vehicles, among others. Last year, the construction sector accounted for 38% of total fatalities at work and 35% of reported industrial accidents. Among 6 major workplace accidents last year, 4 were recorded at the construction sites.
Vietnam will promote the development of renewable energy resources, aiming to increase the proportion of power produced from these sources in the national electricity structure.
Under an adjusted plan on electricity development from 2011 to 2020 with a vision to 2030 that was approved recently, around $148 billion will be invested in the period, excluding projects invested in the build, operate, transfer form. Priorities will be given to developing hydropower plants, especially projects that can prevent flooding, supply water and produce electricity. Research will be made toward building pumped storage hydropower plants in line with the development of the national electricity system, thus bettering the operation of the electricity system. Total capacity of hydropower plants across the country is expected to increase to around 27,800 megawatt by 2030. Meanwhile, total capacity of wind and solar power plants will reach 6,000 megawatt, and 12,000 megawatt by that year. The country also aims to lift total capacity of thermal power plants nationwide to 26,000 megawatt by 2020, generating about 131 billion kilowatt-hour of power and accounting for 49.3% of total electricity output. Vietnam plans to put its first nuclear power plant into operation in 2028. It will produce about 32.5 billion kilowatt-hour by 2030, 5.7% of total power generation. Electricity infrastructure nationwide will also be upgraded.
Vietnam's export turnover to Mexico reached nearly $1.54 billion in 2015, up 49.16% from the previous year, the highest increase in a decade. More details coming up next.
According to the Vietnamese Trade Office in Mexico, Vietnam's key exports to the second-largest Latin American economy include mobile phones and spare parts, leather, footwear, computers, electronic goods and components, aquatic products, garments and textiles. Meanwhile, Vietnam imported $477.52 million worth of products from Mexico in 2015, mostly computers, electronic items, machinery and equipment, animal feeds, steel and metals. Two-way trade between the two countries reached nearly $2.23 billion, an increase of 55.7% year-on-year. The Trade Office expects that bilateral trade will continue rising in the time to come thanks to the recently signed Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, to which Vietnam and Mexico are two active members, and the inauguration of a representative office of the Mexican Import-Export Association in Vietnam.
The cost of building houses is expected to increase due to the recent rise in steel prices, which will in turn likely to cause a spike in home purchase prices.
Real estate developers raised these concerns after the Ministry of Industry and Trade announced additional tariffs to be levied on imported steel products as of March 22nd. This is a temporary safeguard measure against inexpensive imports that was said to be threatening the domestic industry. Under the new decision, the import tax imposed on steel billets could increase from 10% to 23.3%, while the tax imposed on long steel products could rise to 14.2% from below 5%. With the new tariff, steel prices are expected to increase by 3%. According to the Hanoi Real Estate Club, the prices of steel and cement account for 40% of a real estate project's construction costs, and thus the hike in steel prices will definitely lead to surges in house prices. Property developers whose projects are in the first stage of construction could be the most affected. Steel is the most important material for construction projects, and the hike in building costs will force investors to adjust prices for the final products to gain profits. However, housing developers are unsure how long the price hike will last. Experts said that decisive factors involving house prices were not only materials, but also labor costs and demand. In addition, the safeguard measure will only be in effect until October. When prices increase, demand might fall because people tend to wait until prices drop.
Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng has approved the calculation of petroleum import tax based on weighted average of the tariffs, taking into account most favored nation status and free trade agreement.
The previous calculation was based on only most favored nation tariff. According to the Ministry of Finance, the new calculation will also cover the quarterly proportion of petroleum imports from countries which have signed for the FTA tariff. The data used to calculate the above-mentioned component will be collected through electronic customs systems by the General Department of Customs. The new calculation would help keep a close watch on domestic businesses' import of petroleum products from different sources while ensuring national energy security, as also safeguarding the interests of businesses, consumers, and the state as well.
The ministry agreed that there was a difference between current petrol tariff, calculated based on most favored nation status, and that from several ASEAN nations and the Republic of Korea. To deal with the tax difference, the Finance Ministry on March 18 decided to revise the most favored nation import duty for several petroleum products from previous 10 to 13% to 7%.
The authorities of Hanoi have decided to grant financial aid worth 19 billion Vietnam dong, equivalent to $855,000 to support the Central Highlands, South Central and Mekong Delta localities, which have been hit the hardest by drought and saltwater intrusion.
The localities hit by droughts and saltwater intrusion will receive 1 billion dong each. Previously, the Bank for Investments and Development of Vietnam, or BIDV, provided 22 billion dong, over $1 million in support of 16 localities in the regions. The Vietnam Red Cross Society also began sending emergency relief to residents in 11 Central Highlands and Mekong Delta provinces suffering from acute drought and saltwater intrusion. At present, many localities in these regions are currently severely hit by drought and saltwater. Especially, all 13 provinces and cities in the Mekong Delta region have occurred losses caused by saline intrusion. The government has asked relevant ministries and sectors to intensify measures to prevent drought, focusing on dredging canals and building temporary embankments to store water.
On March 20th, hundreds of young girls wearing the traditional Vietnamese costume áo dài cycled to cultural and historical sites around Ho Chi Minh City as part of the third edition of the áo dài festival. The participants cycled about 10 kilometers through the city's main streets, such as Phạm Ngọc Thạch, Lê Duẩn, Nguyễn Thị Minh Khai, and Điện Biên Phủ. The program is significant to the tourism sector for the city in particular and the country in general, as it promotes the image of the Vietnamese traditional long dress.
I want to introduce the tourist sites to the young people while they are wearing the traditional áo dài dresses, as I hope that they will also wear áo dài dresses when introducing the city's beauty to visitors.
The image of Vietnamese women in traditional long dress on the streets and at tourist sites leaves a deep impression on tourists when they visit the city during the festival.
The Vietnamese long dress is beautiful and charming. I was happy to see young people in the costume when I visited the Central Post Office. I want to have a costume made like this so I would be as beautiful as you.
Through the journey, young people not only had a chance to study the city's typical historical and cultural destinations, but also contribute to the development of the city's tourism sector by being seen about the city wearing the traditional costume. The students will join the city's tourism department and other related agencies to encourage local people to wear the traditional áo dài. The Áo dài Festival 2016, taking place in the city from March 8 to 20th, honors the beauty of the Vietnamese traditional costume, attaching it to the city's famous tourist sites to develop its cultural value while promoting its image to international friends. And that has wrapped up our news bulletin. Thanks for watching. For more information, you can log on to our website at www.vietnamplus.vn. We'll see you soon.